Hello, my name is Sharon Danks, and I'm the Executive Director of Green Schoolyards America, and I'm the coordinator of the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative. Thanks so much for joining us today, and you're here today at a meeting of the National Initiative's Community of Practice for schools and districts who are moving learning outside. We're happy to welcome our colleague Dan Schnitzer today to share the work he's doing with Durham Public Schools in Durham, North Carolina. He's the project manager for sustainability and capital improvements with Durham Public Schools. Prior to working in this position, he spent 7 years as the director of sustainability at the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools, and 6 years prior to that as the director of sustainability and operations for the Academy for Global Citizenship, which is an environmental charter school in Chicago. Today, Dan will be giving us a field report about the outdoor learning efforts he's working on with his colleagues at Durham Public Schools. Their outdoor learning program started before the pandemic, and it's growing now to help bring more students outside into the fresh air. The district is working to build their program and facilities to address their current needs while also making investments that will be useful long-term. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dan Schnitzer. Thanks so much for coming today, Dan.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. So what I want to do today for a few minutes is just give a little context and talk about the work that's being done in Durham. And I will say I've sat through a lot of these presentations, be it with this wonderful group or at conferences or webinars. And I always reach a point where I'm like, that's awesome, but like, I don't have that. Like, I don't have that infrastructure. I don't have that partnership. I don't have that money. I don't have that space. I don't have that weather. And so what I have learned to do is, and what I'd encourage everyone is to think in that positive mindset of two things. One is, what do you have and how do you build off of it? Because that's a scenario we will always find ourselves in. But also, how do you build what you need for the long term? And that really is the story that I'm going to tell today, because I just started with Durham in November. I take no credit for anything I'm about to talk about. I'll introduce some of the people that have been working on this for a long time. And the truth is, the success that we're starting to have now and will continue to have into the future is because the groundwork was laid for years and years when sometimes the progress was really slow. So don't underestimate the opportunity to start building what you need for when the floodgates open or when the COVID opens. And that's where we find ourselves in Durham. So igniting limitless potential is our motto, is our mission in Durham Public Schools. We're here in Durham, North Carolina. And we need to think about this, and we need to push all of our staff, administrators, teachers, et cetera, to live by this motto and what that really means. So I'm going to start with this quote, "Children are born with a sense of wonder and an affinity for nature." I really wanted to end the quote there, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but it goes on to say, "Properly cultivated, these values can mature into ecological literacy and eventually into sustainable patterns of living." I believe firmly that children are born with a sense of wonder and affinity for nature. I think many of us on this call will agree with that. And just over time, our systems suck that out of them or don't provide a fertile ground for that to grow. So while the second part I think is super important for our work about getting kids outdoors, I don't think we need to think necessarily about the long-term goals. Sometimes we need to speak the language of, well, such studies have shown test scores will improve, et cetera, et cetera. But we also have to really up the level of conversation around the intrinsic value of being outside and that it's a natural experience for kids. And then we can start building on everything else that goes with it in terms of course, sustainable living, which is also important and which effectively is the mission of our schools, right? So living sustainably. To live in this world, they have to know math, they have to know science, they have to know history, they have to know these things. They also have to know how to engage and interact with the world and how to engage and interact with their own natural tendencies. I believe that level of conversation is what has been going on in Durham Public Schools and what we need to continue to create this culture of success. So for some context, Durham Public Schools currently has 32,000 students enrolled across 53 schools. You can see the breakouts there, about a 52% free and reduced lunch rate, and a total teacher and staff of just north of 7,500 people. So it's impactful, right? I'm sure in this group, we've got smaller districts and much larger districts, but our work is impactful. And if we can continue to scale, it just grows exponentially. So this is who we are. And great graphics department that makes cool Durham Public School graphics like one on the side of the screen. So this is the outdoor learning department. I'm going to talk briefly about each of these people. You might start by saying, I don't have an outdoor learning department. Well, the truth is neither do we. That's why it's in quotes. But Willow Alston Soha, who's in the middle of this graphic, has deemed us as such. And sometimes you just have to start calling yourself things and manifest it into reality. And that's what we're trying to do. The more we get talked about, the more we talk about it, the more we give ourselves a title and a name, the more things become reality because the more serious we're taken. But really what I want to talk about here is if you look at the interdisciplinary and interlevel spread of people kind of leading this charge. So I'm in the capital construction and capital planning department, which is mostly building. Ben is an outdoor education teacher. One of our elementary schools, Merrick Moore, has a dedicated outdoor education teacher. Willow and Linda are district level science and STEM coordinators. And Ashley, who's on the call today as well, is the program manager for a place I'm going to tell you called the Hub Farm, which is a Durham Public Schools owned and run farm that sits on the property of one of our elementary schools. This is key to having people at different levels, different expertise, different networks within the department, different networks in the community to, again, help build this as a groundwork framework for outdoor learning. So when we talk about framework, again, kind of framework plus COVID is landing us in the perfect storm. We're not there yet, but we're at a place where it's no longer a bunch of weirdos having conversations at picnic tables about being outdoors. It's now a bunch of weirdos having conversations with district level staff about making this permanent to what we do. And what's great is we have the support throughout all the different levels. So my direct supervisor is the head of construction capital planning. He's done sustainability work and he cares deeply about getting kids outdoors. And our COO is passionate about this work as well. And so the more we have this cross strata approach, the better situated we are. And science specialists, Hub Farm, you talk about the BOLD network, which is something, as you hear about it, I was so happy when I heard that this existed in Durham and then to meet the folks. If you don't have something like that, it's time to start it. Outdoor education teachers, etc. So the Hub Farm. The Hub Farm is a 30-acre property located behind Eno Valley Elementary School. It used to be an old farm and then just became overgrown and the district did nothing to it. It started to get redeveloped with a vision and it was taken on by our CTE program. It's got woodlands, ponds, barns, all the great things you can see in the picture as well as listed on the side. And really its purpose is twofold. One is as a internal field trip destination site, but really as the center of that hub that reaches out to the spokes that are the schools to provide them with what they need. In the future, we envision having school garden specialists on staff who will spend their time going out helping working on school gardens. We're having conversations around chickens and bees at schools. It'd be great to have experts that are centralized in the Hub Farm and basically envisioning it like any other department in the district where you have specialties and expertise that go out and assist and support the schools. The difference is they also have 30 acres where they can be a living laboratory for this work and a destination site. So even if one doesn't have this site or a site like this, the concept of either formally or informally creating networks of experts to help support so we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel and spinning our wheels when it comes to things like school gardens, like pollinators, like landscaping, like stormwater management. And then there's the BOLD network. The BOLD network started, which it stands for Building Outdoor Learning in Durham. It started with a grant and it is open to anyone in the public school system. And it is a loose network of teachers, administrators, district level staff, anyone, partners that get together monthly for meetings and have for the past 2 or 3 years, either for professional development, to learn what people are doing, to share resources, but it helps build that so it's not one individual sitting anywhere, be it a school, be it at the district office, et cetera, trying to support all of this work. It connects people and enables them to connect with each other and help build and support their own work. And then it provides opportunities for things like grants, where they can collectively go after it and see scope and scale, and they can share best practices about what they're doing, in this case, what they're doing outside and what that looks like, school visits, et cetera. Through the BOLD network, we created the Outdoor Learning Guide, which the cover is on there, and it's linked. The link is at the bottom left. It's also linked on the Green Schoolyards America webpage in their resources. And what was really interesting about this is while we were building it, we tried to find the balance between direct COVID response and long-term. We don't just want this to be something, it's a rare opportunity. We don't just want this to exist and give the resources now that we're in COVID. We want to be able to say, let's build it now and have these skills and opportunities for the long term. And it was meant to be digestible. This is not a 300-page guide, and no knocks on any 300-page guides out there, but this is, I think, 16 pages. It hits on all the major topics, and it's really supposed to get to that, I would say, tier 2 level educator that is like, I want to go outside. It sounds great. Like, I just don't quite know, like, what do I have to think about? So it gives some solutions, gives lots of questions. It also is designed for administrators to be able to say, like, okay, let me think about these like 3 things, and then I'm cool with it. Like, do our teachers need walkie-talkies, first aid kits, forms, just some basic stuff to get the conversation going. And then it has to be up to the schools and the administrators and the teachers to make those decisions. We can't suggest or make recommendations or give everything to them, because then the system starts to fall apart at all the details and all the nuance and all the personality differences that exist. I find it to be very digestible and very usable in terms of, again, things to think about. And what we're really pushing people to do is, in a sense, go like slightly above where you're comfortable. So like if you're just comfortable thinking about it, like just take a walk with your kids outside, like just start there. And if you're comfortable taking your kids outside, then start taking your kids outside and learning about the outside, etc. And so now the Bold Network over the past couple months has spent a few weeks doing professional development for teachers and administrators on this. And we're not bringing in these wonderful national experts who exist and who I would love to get if we can, Sharon and your team. But these are folks internal who can really speak to exactly what they're doing. And it provides that level of comfort. So always look to whoever's already doing the work and share that out. And that's really what we're taking advantage of. All right, so now I want to talk really about the short-term immediate response, medium-term, and long-term vision for how all this happens. Structural and all the super long-term. Short-term, site assessments. Actually using a model from the Green Schoolyards America webpage, I and others have walked around sites, and I'll show you a picture later, where we marked off with little colored dots, what's what? What's a shade tree you can run a class under? What's a pergola? What's a hallway? And it has opened people's eyes who've been teaching, even some for 1 year and some for 20, 30 years, to be like, oh, I never considered that I could teach under there. Or that, wow, that hill really is great. Or that shade is great, but sometimes sun is great, right? Like, oh, those bleachers by the track that are tucked into the trees, that's just as good for watching track as it is for running a math class. And you can be socially distant, etc. So site assessments are really important, just to walk the site, mark it up, be as complex or as simple as you need them to be. Teacher kits, I'll show you what we put together in a minute, but the idea of teacher kits are like, what do teachers need to go outside? We all know and love teachers. If you've ever opened the storage closet of a teacher's room, though, especially in kindergarten, like my mom, you know it's full of a lot of stuff, and they're gonna wanna take everything outside. But what we have to emphasize is being outside is not the same as being inside, so you don't need everything. So we put together with teacher input kind of what we think you might need, and then they can go ahead and customize it. By kit, I mean, it's a link to a bunch of things on Amazon, and schools can go after grants, or if we get district funding, we can start to purchase and put them together. But the idea is like, this is just what to think about to keep it simple. Tents and benches, we're looking at partnering, we're currently partnering with a few construction firms that we're hoping to set up a volunteer day and fix up picnic benches. I'm sure you all have seen the rotting picnic benches, and it's really frustrating. So we're looking just to get some, of our contractors out there, do a volunteer day with their group, bring some lumber, fix it up, help out the community. They're super interested in it. It's really just the logistics that are a sticking point, but that's overcomable. We're looking at metal picnic benches. So they have a little more longevity. They can still be moved. What about convertible benches? What about the athletic benches? What about bleachers? So we're providing all of these. And one thing we've done is we've reached out to a couple suppliers and asked for bulk discount rates. And they are significant, like up to 30% off retail. And if we can't, we haven't been able to buy them in bulk, but both companies I've spoken to are willing to offer those bulk prices if schools purchase them individually. Again, through internal funds, PTA funds, grants. And so again, I encourage to think large and then kind of work down from there. This is giving schools the opportunity to buy a lot more stuff because the price is significantly lower than just going on and picking stuff out. And then the foundation, we're lucky enough to have the Durham Public Schools Foundation. which is a nonprofit entity whose purpose is to serve the Durham community by raising funds and distributing funds that support public education. So they have done so throughout COVID, and they are providing close to $300,000 in funds that schools apply for things like picnic benches, rental tents, permanent structures, etc. So it's about finding all these pieces and trying to piece them together. Long term, we're looking at what it would take to put in permanent structures in all of our schools. For us, permanent structures means raised decking or concrete floors, weatherproof roof, just kind of your traditional public park pavilion. The reason we're going for this is because we know maintenance is always a challenge. We don't want something that people have to mow under or mow around or something that has to get taken down with weather. Those are great short-term solutions, but we want this as part of what we do and who we are. So they have to be close to the building. They have to be ADA accessible. Potentially they could run electric to them. So we're looking at legitimately $20,000 to $40,000 investments in these. But again, because we have this multi-tiered level of support and multi-tiered level of people looking at it, we're able to look at it on a district scale and see what it would take to do this at a district level, or maybe an elementary level, or maybe just a pilot 2 or 3 school level. But it's always big picture thinking that we then will break out into chunks as to how to make it a reality. Through the BOLD network, we're looking at ongoing professional development for teachers and what that might look like. We're looking for either internal or grant funding to provide that year round so teachers have that support. Quite honestly, I have found a lot of that support, not just in Durham, but in my other work, is just like answering, I don't want to say simple questions, but basic questions. And I don't mean that in like a negative way, but like, what do I do? Like, where can I go? What do I have to do from my office? What do I need? What can I teach? What can I teach? What do I do if a kid hears a bird and starts watching the bird instead of what I'm teaching? Those are great and fair questions. And I'm not diminishing the questions, but those are, what we have to realize is those are overcomable. We all have spaces. We don't need $30,000 pavilions unless we have people willing to go into them. And so we have to arm our teachers and run these parallel tracks to go into them. Similarly, admin professional development. We've got to get principals and other admin comfortable with this. COVID's a great, I'm going to just say, cover for that, right? Outdoors is a healthy, safe place to be. So let's get them outside. They could be walking, they could be sitting, they could be just going from building to building, they could be taking stretch breaks, they could do morning meeting outside. Let's get our admin comfortable with it, and let's start to solve some of their other problems with infrastructure. Oh, you've got some capacity issues? Well, we don't expect a class to be outdoors all day, every day. But with this development of this outdoor classroom space and your support, we have a little more flex space there. And when Sharon was talking about weather earlier, one of my favorite quotes is, there's no wrong weather, just wrong clothes. So coming from Chicago, like, we bundle up, we go outside if it's cold and you deal with it. So the weather is fine. It has to be managed and dealt with, but let's not let that be an impediment. Let's let that be the impetus for solving problems. Then structurally, how are we doing this as who we are, as part of our personality? We're looking at indoor air quality. We want to improve indoor air quality. That's been a hot topic for a long, long time. COVID's really putting that into light. How do we improve indoor air quality? And then the flip side of that coin is, how do we say outdoor air quality generally is better than indoor air quality? So let's just use that as a starting point. If we're concerned about indoor air quality, I got a great solution for you. Design standards. I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to help rework our district design standards. And these are things from like boilers and chillers to what is the sizing and the programming of a school. And so we've been able to implement outdoor learning as a core piece of that. Every new construction and major renovation should have a permanent outdoor space. What's great about that inclusion is, again, let's call that a $30,000 like standalone unit in new school construction of $40 to $70 million. That's not going to be a value engineered piece that really is going to have a lot of leverage to get moved. So it's value add. It's relatively small compared to the large projects, but the impact is huge. So we're thinking about, from a design perspective, then how do we have flow in and out? How do we get kids in and out? Do they have to walk down the hall, around the corner, through the corridor, past the front office, and now they're outside? So 10 minutes later and 10 minutes back, now you have 15 minutes to be outside with your kids, or do they all have direct access to some kind of covered safe space? So I just want to very quickly run through, I'm closing in on time. On my left is one of these site assessments that was done. So it's an overview with dots representing different things, natural areas, structural areas, etc. I walk it with a teacher. So I don't just go and do these myself. I walk with a teacher or a principal. That's a great way to get buy-in, to say, hey, I'd love to walk your facility, give you some possible options, short-term and long-term. Here's what you have. Here's what you could have if. And then the pictures on the right, at least as of now, are the like on the ground, what it looks like. So I would mark it on a map and then take an on the ground picture so they know what it is that they're looking at. Great picnic tables. There's a tree once it fills in, partial shade. Maybe that's a good place to add in a permanent shade structure. These are the types of conversations we have. You see this as a bus entrance. I see this as after the kids are there, you see some benches there, they can go outside and sit there, or small groups can get pulled out there. Or you can go outside if there's like a rain or hailstorm and be safe, but observe what's going on out there. These are Eagle Scout benches, big fan of the Eagle Scout projects. They do good work. These are really sturdy benches that were built. Again, they're movable. This is in an unshaded area. So I see this and say, let's add in a canopy here if we can and make it a shaded area. Or this part happens to be on the north side of the building. It actually gets shaded, at least part of it. Or sometimes you want to be in the sun. So let's look at what we have already and how that can be used. I've also measured these, and we're trying to build these as prototypes because they're really solid construction. And so this is another project I've given to some of our local contractors to say, if y'all want to make another contribution, you got men and women who want to build stuff with their hands and not just, fix the picnic tables, let's get some lumber and start building these. Some of our schools have these amazing areas tucked into nature. This one needs the benches replaced. Again, hopefully that's a project we're going to have volunteers do. But we have to identify them. These are just awesome trees you can sit under. Right? We need to identify these spaces, especially with lower enrollment because of COVID right now. In many of our schools, you can take 8, 9 kids and sit out under those trees and have conversations. I'm just going to talk about this real briefly. This is one of my favorite things at Hillendale. They have a stand of trees. As you can see, it's not a wooded campus. They literally put up a sign that said woodland habitat. That's it. We have to look at what we have already. And sometimes it's as easy as putting up a sign and naming it. And then teachers can say, I'm teaching about habitats. Let's go there and learn about it and see what's there and just observe what's there. A tree fell down there. Suddenly that becomes where they sit, right? So look at what you have. Sometimes just put up a sign. It might draw people there. There's another sign next to it that says grasslands. And all that is, they roped it off. They told the mowing crew not to mow there, and the grass grows high, and they observe the difference between when we mow grass and when we don't. What species come in, what don't, what animals come in, what kind of don't. And just some of the covered spaces that exist. And then this augmented reality tool, if you haven't used it yet, you're not familiar with it, it's on the Green Schoolyards America website. It's awesome. We talk about renting and now purchasing some tents or permanent structures. Really hard conceptually to understand it. Even with 4 people standing at the corners, really hard to conceptualize it. Using this tool, this is a 30 by 30, I believe. When you can do this, that's Hillendale as well. Open field, when I talk about putting a tent there and can take a picture of it, say this is what it'll look like. Suddenly the teachers and the principal are like, oh, that doesn't take up the whole thing. And that's not god awful. It's a great, great tool. And I will be following up with Sharon and Sean and all them saying, we need more options. I want a 10 by 10 and a 10 by 20 and a 20 by 20, right? It's a great, great tool. And it starts to bridge this gap between what could be and what is and what will be. Okay, I believe this is lastly, this is the teacher kit that we talked about that we put together. I can share a link to it. It just kind of gives you a sense of what we're talking about. Student dry erase boards, binder clips, because then you can turn your dry erase boards into clipboards. A teacher whiteboard, it's a cool one. It's got a handle, you can store stuff inside. First aid kit, and then the one that I thought was most brilliant that came from a teacher was an apron or a waist apron, pockets, just to bring some of their stuff out in. They can wear it, they can bring it out. And of course, kids and teachers can all sit on the ground, sit on tree stumps. But if teachers want a more comfortable, formal space to sit, I'm going to share for that as well. So this is really what I'm ending with. Some of my stuff is being blocked off. So I'm going to actually make it smaller so I can read all the words. Encourage your kids to look for nature everywhere you go. It's in the weed breaking through the pavement, in the leaves forming small clumps along the side of the road. It's in the sky at any given time, of day or night. It's the wind doing what it does to your hair, or not in my case. Look around and it won't take long to find it. And I bring that up just to encourage everyone to realize we don't need this huge infrastructure. We're going to go for it, especially now with COVID and possible CARES and ESSER funding. We're going to try to go for it, but also it's always there. We're already doing it. Let's start naming it. Let's start experiencing it. And let's ask do things like when you go from your bus to the school, I want you to notice what you hear, what you see. And that just starts creating a culture around this type of work. I hope I didn't go over, or if I did, I hope I didn't go too far over, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much. That was just fantastic, Dan. And I love everything you're talking about and how comprehensive and well thought out and just so amazingly pulled together in so many different areas. And I think my favorite concept is the name it, whether it's your naming that you have if you declare something an outdoor learning department, you have one, and if you name your woodland, you have one, right? I love that. So I think all of us can take that away from this presentation and try that ourselves, and it's just so helpful. Thank you so much. And I think we do have a few minutes for questions, and so if anyone would like to ask questions, I see some kudos going into the chat. Feel free to put them in the chat or to just unmute yourself and ask. Dan, what were two different things you mentioned about funding at the end there, I think?
So it's twofold. One is identify it and go for it, both internally and externally. We have a public school foundation that has raised funds for supporting digital learning and then supporting students to go back into schools. And so they've been extraordinarily helpful. We look for all the small grants that are out there too. And we look internally for two things. One is infrastructure funding on the capital side of things. And then the other is funding that might already exist, but we think we can use it better or differently. Whether that's through professional development and instead of outsourcing it, seeing if we can do it internally with the expertise we already have and giving teachers and other administrators the time and funding needed to develop it. But the other piece is simply like, don't let that be the barrier right now. See what you can do without funding. And now, as I'm saying that, perhaps what that question was asking was the federal funding, which is the CARES Act and the ESSER money. I don't know what ESSER stands for, but all the new federal money that's coming in for schools as a response to COVID. And needless to say, everyone's going to be jumping at those funds in the school district. So starting now, if you haven't already, to think about how that could best be used for outdoor learning in a long-term way, I think will be very beneficial. So you can say, like, listen, curriculum and instruction wants, 10 million of those dollars. I just want, $20,000 and start getting those in now.
And on the funding end of things, we have Mary Filardo from 21st Century School Fund came and gave a presentation at our last meeting, and that's just been posted on our website in the community of practice. If you want to hear the talk specifically about the federal funds and her slide deck about what it all is and what it means, it's now on the website. And the upshot, as Dan was saying, is that every district, I think, in the country is getting these funds automatically according to the formulas that your state has to allocate federal funds. And they have so many different things that they cover that if you want to be an advocate for it, go to help your district to think about how they can accomplish the goals that it's listed in there that have to do with mental health and learning loss and infrastructure, and use the outdoors to accomplish those goals. Then you can use those funds to invest in those things. And so it's making a case internally in your school district for doing that. That is the way to receive those, because your district will already have it, and there's so many competing needs that the more you can accomplish at once with the funds, the better. Let's see, other questions out there? I see so many kudos. I don't see many questions, lots of impressive and thank yous and positivity being appreciated. And I also wanted to highlight your outdoor learning guide that you brought up briefly there. It's just incredible. We do have a link to it on our website, and we'll add a link to it in connection with this webinar too in the future. It's just fantastic that you've put that all together as a model, to use throughout your district, but it's also a model for us all. A question.
Let me just clarify. Again, this is like teamwork. I kind of parachuted in at the end here. Everyone, like, this is a few years of these people working really, really hard that I mentioned, and some of them I think are on today. Like, it's not a one-person show. You got to leverage who you have, and just try to pull it all together. So this is all for them.
Yeah, everything I think with planning for outdoor learning is a team effort. Definitely the case. What was the outdoor classroom space on? Let's see, there's a question. What was the outdoor classroom space on school-owned property, or was the outdoor classroom space on school-owned property? I think that's some of the ones that you showed. They were all on school property, right?
Yeah, all those were on school property. And again, our schools are very diverse in where they are located. Some are just, it feels like the hub farm and they're out there. But what's funny is the hub farm actually is like right off of a very busy street, and the school that it's attached to doesn't feel like this beautiful oasis of nature, whereas the Hub Farm does literally down a path. So yeah, some of our schools have nature trails, et cetera, but all the pictures I showed were on school property. And I think all of them or most of them were from that one school from Hillendale.
Fabulous. And I do see more questions in the chat, and I'm thinking that we should take at least 10 minutes to have some breakout time. So at this point, I just want to say thank you again to Dan for that fabulous presentation, and applause all around. We really appreciate your time today and sharing your work with us.